Hi, everybody. My name is Minda Hartz, and you're here for lunch on Monday with us for Secure the Seat Live. I have my special guest, Sarah Morgan. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody.
We know that you could be anywhere right now, and you're here having lunch with us. So if you're watching us on LinkedIn or YouTube, you're in the place to be. Today, we're actually going to talk about something that many of you are probably thinking about that's top of mind, and so that's navigating employee resistance, returning back to the physical office. Maybe some of you are starting to return back as leaders, and you're trying to grapple with that. And then also as employees, do you feel comfortable, all of the things. But before we jump into it, you know how it goes. If you've been here before, put your information, any questions or comments inside the chat box. We'll be pulling from those as the conversation goes on. And then also, this is your chance. You have an expert in the place. So if you have a question, make sure you put it in there. And then Sarah, tell everybody a little bit more about you, Miss Chief Excellence Officer.
Yes, so I am the Chief Excellence Officer of BuzzARooney LLC. I started my company about 2 years ago, and I do coaching and consulting for small businesses and startups on how to build inclusive workplace culture. And I also have a podcast called Leading in Color, where I'm posting bi-weekly episodes where talking to leaders of color on how they navigate being inclusive and living with that kind of dual consciousness in corporate environments. And I have my blog, The Buzz on HR, my BuzzARooney community of email subscribers. And then I still work a full-time job. So I'm here in my physical office today having lunch with you, where I'm the head of HR for a national retail services company based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. So that's where I am today.
Awesome. You have listened to my podcast, Secure the Seat. Sarah and I have one of my top episodes to date that have been downloaded on how to navigate a toxic workplace. So make sure that you go and check out Secure the Seat, the podcast. But Sarah, let's jump right into it. You just said it. You're back in the office, right?
Yes.
What can leaders do to start preparing to bring employees back after being gone for several months? I know some people are comfortable with remote work now, right? What's things they need to consider?
Well, the first thing I think leaders need to consider is, why are we bringing back people into the physical office? Is it because we're trying to push normalcy onto people in a time that we know is still very not normal? Or do we really feel like the operations of our business are better served by having folks in the office? And if it's about creating normalcy, I would encourage leaders to pause on that, because it takes people, 40 something days to develop a habit. And so we have been in virtual working environments now for going on 3 or 4 months. And so people are now in the habits of virtual work. They have a routine of how they wake up and how they get their day started. And is it worth it to disrupt that by bringing them back into the physical office, where they're now going to have to develop a new routine? I've been back in the office now since mid-June. And I got to tell you, those first 30 days, it was like, what am I doing? What is this place? Like, I had to get back into the groove of being physically in my office, and the time that I wake up, and my getting used to commuting again, and my coffee and my all of those things that I do, being around other people. I had to get used to that all over again. And so I encourage leaders to think about that, and whether or not you're causing disruption for the sake of grasping at normalcy, that this is not normal, and so what normalcy has looked like to us for such a long period of time is still not going to be, like it was. The other thing is that you really have to take time to think about what things you need to do in your office to make sure that people are safe. I actually put together, I did a series on my podcast called Reopening After Rona. And I did a checklist and a list of questions to kind of ask yourself and go through, so that you can look at, your physical spaces, buildings with elevators, and what are you doing in your break rooms? How many people are you going to allow in conference rooms? Like, you have to think about all of that stuff before you start inviting people back into the workplace. And then when you bring them in, you got to reorient them into what the new rules were. I feel like we did a pretty good job of that. We brought people back in phases. So the first phase was really like our executives and managers. And we spent probably the first couple of weeks just wandering around the building like, we can't have one-on-one meetings in offices anymore. There's not sufficient distance for us to be able to do that. So now we've got to make sure that we're having meetings in conference rooms, but we can't put 10 people in a conference room anymore either, because there's not enough physical space. So how many people can be in each one of the conference rooms? How many people can be in a break room? If we have X number of people and we can only fit half of that into the break room, do we need to convert one of our conference rooms to a break space? Like, we had to walk through all of those kinds of issues. And ultimately, as we did that, we realized that we could bring probably a third of our employee population back into the building, but the rest of the folks, are still remote. So we're probably about, like I said, a third of us are here in the office working because it just makes more sense, for us to be here. Our accounting folks, some of our operations team, our IT teams, like those groups that working virtually is more difficult. It's not easy. You can't cut checks, from your house. But for those of us who are office manager, folks like that are here. But most of our support staff is still working virtually, and we have, we don't have any plans to open up further until we get less cases in our area and feel like the need for physical distance and stuff like that isn't as high.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that it's like, yeah, everybody just come on back to work, but there's so many considerations that we have to have. So if you are here joining us for lunch, welcome. If you have any questions to ask Sarah, make sure that you pop them in the chat box. We're talking about, what can leaders do to create an environment in which we're slowly starting to return people back to the physical space. The other thing we talked about, you mentioned normalizing, right? Coming back to work. So what about normalization of remote work? Because there was a time where leaders would say, oh, you can't do that from home. But now there are certain roles you can do from home. So we've disrupted what can be done outside of the physical office because, listen, people don't feel comfortable coming back. Many don't. So what can workplaces do to start to kind of be a little more flexible in terms of the return?
I think this definitely has kicked open the door and exposed the myth about not being able to do many of the jobs that we do in a virtual environment, for sure. And so now employers really have an opportunity to walk the talk on flexibility. We've talked about the need for flexible work environments, more flexibility in work and in scheduling and in where we work and how we work. And so where that's possible, I feel like employers and leaders have an opportunity to allow more flexibility for their workforces in this moment and look at and be thinking about as we come out of COVID, because eventually we will. Like, cases are still very high. We're still going to be in this mode for a while. I don't want to, pretend like it's over, because it's not.
Yeah.
But eventually we will find a vaccine, we will find a successful course of treatment, and we will come out of this. So when we do, we can take the lessons that we've learned about the ability for us to work virtually and continue to give people more options of how they can work in a way that allows them to live their life, the way that they need to, and still be able to work and produce for your company. I think that that's a blessing that we're going to get out of this COVID pandemic. And I hope to see leaders embrace that, as an opportunity for better work-life balance for their employee populations and not be so concerned with, okay, phew, that's over. Let's go back to doing things how we did it before. I think the thought we need to be having is, phew, that's over. Now, how do we take what we've learned in this moment and make work better than it was before?
Yeah, absolutely. All the things that you said are super important. And I do think that we can't, at least leaders, can't hold tight to some of these old ideologies of what we can't do from the workplace. I know someone in the chat said their company is leveraging the bank, their e-check processing system, so that some of these things can be, outsourced. Sarah, let's take a question from the chat. Here it says, I'm in higher education. What are some best practices you would recommend for the education world overall, as repeated quarantine will be required throughout the academic year?
Yeah. Now, I will say I'm not an expert on the education field. I've worked in industrial and retail environments my entire career. What I can say has really surprised me about education is how truly unprepared they have been for the switch to remote learning. And it seems like there's a very big divide between educators on those who work in virtual and those who are only comfortable being in the classroom. And so I would encourage educators to really focus on ways that they can continue to embrace and learn more about virtual learning. Because if we are going to be in this state where we're not able to be together physically for possibly up to a year or more from now, we can't pause education. So we have to find ways to shift how we teach both children and adults in a virtual learning environment. So, and I would hope, I don't know that there is, but I would hope that there are ways that we teach educators on how to engage with their populations in a virtual environment instead of just taking the same ways that we've taught people and just trying to smush it into a camera. The other thing I'll say is be mindful of fatigue. People really do. Zoom fatigue, camera fatigue, whatever you want to call it, is real. And so I've seen and heard people, requiring students to be on camera for the whole time and stuff like that. Like, be very cognizant about not policing people's behavior in that way. And that, I think that's true for both education and for the workplace, because fatigue is real, and there are some people who are just uncomfortable with themselves on camera, and so you don't want to exacerbate any of those kinds of anxieties by requiring people to be in front of the camera when it's not absolutely necessary.
Yep, absolutely. Another question from the chat is, someone said that they've been thinking about how can employers, employees better support those people who work from home, but they work from their home life may be unsafe, right? It can be done in those situations, but yet their job may be able to be at home now. Right?
Yeah. So in those situations, yeah, that's very tough. I would hope that organizations would look for ways to allow employees to report if they are unsafe. I know, like with my kids, we have a code word that we establish. So particularly we have teenagers. And so if they're out at a party or if they're somewhere, they can text us this word or this emoji that lets us know that they are in, distress and need to be picked up, quickly. And we've had that happen only once, where there were drugs at a party and our son was like, get me out of here. And so then at that point we call and say, we've got to come get you because of blah, 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 so that there's not a situation where they're feeling like they're being a cornball, that peer pressure piece of it. So I would suggest creating some ways for employees who may not be safe to report that they are unsafe and to provide them with potentially some alternative resources of where they can go so that they can be safe. Another thing that may be helpful when you're dealing with folks in abuse, that's one of those moments where requiring them to be on camera might be advantageous. A lot of times abusers don't want to be detected and don't want to be seen. And so if that person does have to be on camera for meetings and things like that, then at least you can give them some respite and some, way to make sure that they're not bothered for those periods of time. But the most important thing is to give them a way to report to you that they are unsafe, and then work with them with as much discretion and confidentiality as possible to help them get out of the situation and find somewhere to go where they can be safe.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer, Sarah, because again, everyone doesn't experience the workplace the same, even at home, right? Now that many of us are working from home. And so for some of us, we're like, yeah, don't want to go back, love my space. But others may be in a situation where they found some relief being in the office. And so we definitely want to hold space.
And it may just be, and even if it's not as extreme as domestic violence, you also have a lot of people who are in situations where they are working virtually, but their spouse or their partner is laid off. That's some weird energy to have to be in every day. And so you have to be thinking about all people holistically and really checking in on them to make sure that they're feeling mentally well and psychologically safe in the environment where they're working, and give them safe space to be able to express to you where they're having difficulty, and know that you as a leader are going to try to support them. I know I can see from the comments, we got a lot of, human resources people in the crowd as well. Shout out to the homies in HR. But I definitely, want to make sure for us that we are particularly in tune with the need for employees to have that kind of support in this moment, because it's not easy to be, at home all the time, and not everybody has comfortable, spaces. Your resources are drained. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into working from home that can be very uncomfortable for people, and we can't lose, sight of that.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears just a little, because, some people have been out of the office for a while. And so, some people will return back and they'll still be microaggression, macroaggression, all the things they were bad behaviors they had in the workplace. It may even be magnified now that they've been at home. So how do we prepare for those situations that might arise as we return back to work?
Yeah, I think this is such a great question, because one of the things I do with my BuzzARooney community is I do a monthly Ask Me Anything, where employees, where from my followers and stuff, can send me questions, and I answer it in a special episode that I send to them. And I got that question a lot of, like, people are on unemployment. They're getting, this extra money. They don't want to come back to work. Let me tell you something. People don't want to come back to work because they are afraid of either catching a virus that can kill them or someone that they love, or your work environment was toxic and they've been out for a couple of months and they're not trying to come back up in there dealing with you and your foolishness. It has absolutely nothing to do with unemployment benefits. And we have to stop perpetuating this idea that people are lazy and don't want to work. And that's not what it is. It's about the environment that they're in. So you have to be making sure that your environment is going to be welcoming for those individuals when they come back. Being on furlough or being laid off is hard. And so if it's an emotional experience for that individual. There's a lot of uncertainty. And even if you are getting unemployment, that does not necessarily mean that it's enough to cover your bills. And you don't know what's happening with that person's partner or spouse, so you don't know what kinds of situations that they've gone through during that period of time where they were away. So you've got to give them an opportunity to express that. You've got to make sure that they understand that they are welcome when they come back. And you've got to show that you are excited for their return. And you've got to make sure also that you reorient them. Like, don't just expect them to jump in and remember immediately everything it is they had to do. Again, habits are built in 30 to 45 days. They are now in the habit of furlough. They are now in the habit of not working. So you've got to give them a chance to get up to speed, get reoriented and acclimated back into what it means to work. So that would be, my biggest piece of advice for people who are returning to work. Now is the time for us to show incredible grace and kindness towards one another, because with everything that is going on in the world, we do not need the added stresses of feeling like you're perpetually disappointing your boss or your supervisor or your coworkers because they are having a different experience of life and this pandemic than what it is that you're having.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I know that the chat is going crazy. Shout out to all the HR folks and for those who show up for Mondays at noon. Sarah, you know that I'm a lover of grits and rap lyrics, and you know that I could not let you go without asking you my bonus questions. What's your favorite rap lyric right now and why?
Oh man, I don't know, because I really I'm sitting here looking for, I am in love, like y'all know I love Cardi B. And so WAP is my jam. Minda and I, for those who don't know, like we had a whole like back and forth on Twitter. Like, I don't know if I'm mature enough for these lyrics. So, I'm trying to look, and I'm scrolling through these lyrics, trying to find something that is appropriate for this occasion that I can share, and I got nothing from but that is definitely I love Cardi, I love Megan Thee Stallion, I love the energy and the complete in your face against respectability politics that the two of them bring to how they are as women. And I stand that energy. And so, although I'm not there, I don't think I'm their target demographic, but I very much love what it is that they're doing. And so, yeah, I don't let my kids sing it. That's one song that they are permanently banned for. I'm waiting to see what Kids Bop tries to do with these lyrics, because it's going to be hard work for them trying to figure out how to remix this for the children. But yeah, I mean, just the stir that it caused, and the conversation that we're having about misogyny and misogynoir in rap as a result of this, and that respectability politics and the whole spectrum of feminism. I love all the conversation that it starts, and just the complete freedom in your body and your femininity that they both represent. So I stand for that, and it is my favorite song of the moment, although I can't share any of the lyrics with y'all right now.
Yes, well, I appreciate you not doing that. So I know Kids Bop, they're doing some work and play.
Yeah, there's some chores in this house. There's some chores in this house. I guess they're gonna have to fix chores. We're gonna have to work on it.
Chores. But yes, I look forward to. That's the version I'm going to need as well. So the next question is, as we know, a lot of things have been happening during quarantine, during this racial time period in our country. What can our leaders do to make the workplace better than they found it?
Oh, that's so. The most important thing for leaders to be doing right now is to begin their anti-racist journey. If they haven't already started, to begin their anti-racist journey. If they have already started, now is an essential time for you to be putting into daily practice the things that you have learned about anti-racism so far. Anti-bias conversation has really moved into, it's just not a strong enough word, because we take this approach that we all have bias. And so, I just have to accept those things about myself. You don't have to be racist, and there is no neutrality. When we just had an incident last night of a man who's in Wisconsin, who's in the hospital because of a domestic incident. He's picking up his children, and he ends up, shot in the back and in the hospital fighting for his life. And we're dealing with this in the midst of a pandemic. These incidents keep happening. It is so hard for Black employees, people of color, women, in the world right now. And so leaders have got to do better and more to understand the complexities of systemic racism, how it permeates into our workplaces, and what we can actively do to address that, so that our employees, when they come into the workplaces, they feel supported, they feel seen, and they feel safe. And if there's one thing I want to see come out of this, on top of the embracing of flexibility in terms of how and where we work, it would be that. It would be to not let George Floyd, not let Breonna Taylor, not let Elijah McClain, who we're now on the anniversary of his death and still no movement to arrest the officers that killed him, to not let their deaths be in vain, to not let the outpouring and the outcries and the sympathy that came after it to just be performative, but to actually let it be something that awakens us to action, so that we move forward with making workplaces more inclusive, more equitable, and just overall better for people's emotional health.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, this is a humanity issue, and we really, as leaders, we all have a sphere of influence. We have to humanize the workplace and allow people to have some dignity as they walk in the streets, as they walk in the workplaces. And, I want to take one last question, Sarah, before I ask you about some of the things that are coming up on your end that I wanted to share with the community that I believe will benefit them in more ways than one. But someone in the audience says, Sarah, what have you learned about yourself over quarantine?
That I need more downtime than what I allow myself. I do not make enough time in my schedule for downtime and rest. And because the pandemic and the racial unrest that is going on during the pandemic has been so heavy on people physiologically, I have been just tired. And so I have had to be much more intentional about making time for rest, and for embracing the need for naps. Naps are wonderful. Like, let's get a nap. So embracing the need for naps and rest and downtime, and to, find those pockets of rest and normalcy in the midst of everything that's going on. So that's the one thing that I have learned and embraced about myself, is that I need to make more time for rest.
Yes. This has been great. You know that I always enjoy my time with you, Sarah, but tell us what you're up to. I know you have a big announcement that you want to let people know about today in terms of what you're doing and how people find you, support you, all the things.
So you can find me at my website, which is BuzzARooney LLC.com. You can see that on the screen, BuzzARooney. That's my company website, and you can get on my email list. You can get to all of my social media and stuff from there. And while you are there, click on my HROI Summit, because that's really the thing I'm most excited and scared, truthfully, about in this moment. The HROI Summit is a 2-day virtual workshop. The first day, we're going to be talking all about pay equity. I'm going to be walking you through with me. It's a 4-hour workshop of us going through how you do an equity audit within your organization, how you address inequities when you find it, how you put together a plan to address those inequities within pay, and move forward, with pay transparency and equity within your organization going forward. So that's day 1. And day 2, I'm calling Anti-Racist HR, where we are going to be talking about the top 5 things that you can do within your organization to begin to address systemic race issues within the workplace, and to make workplaces psychologically safe and more progressive for people of color and women and all of those with marginalized identities. Then after the workshops are over, you can sign up and join my coaching cohort, where it will be me and some of the best human resources and DEI minds that'll be meeting with you every other week to talk about your progress and how you go back and you implement the concepts you learned in the workshops. And we're going to be together for 2 months, helping you to put your plan together, answering your questions, letting you practice on how it is that you're going to talk to your CEO about how we're going to put pay equity and how we're going to change these policies to make them more fair and equitable for those of us with marginalized identities. So tickets are selling fast. As of today, we have 10 tickets left and 4 spots in the coaching cohort. So I definitely want you to go to my website, get the information, sign up today. We have scholarships available. We have flexible payment options. So if you have questions about it, you can email me at HROISummit@BuzzARooneyLLC.com, and I can tell you more about the scholarships and about the flexible payment arrangements to make sure. But get your tickets so that we can get you in the summit and get you ready, get this knowledge so that you can go back to your workplaces and make things better.
Yes. What do we do? Go to the summit. That's what you do. Get the tools you need. And so I'll make sure to tag Sarah in this post on LinkedIn, but go to the website, connect. There's only 10 tickets left, so
don't waste time.
Don't waste time, okay? And, I just want to thank all of you for spending your lunch hour with us. Again, you could be doing anything right now. You could be napping, but you're here with us, so we appreciate you doing that. Also, too, if you haven't, please go sign up for my mailing list at mindaharts.com. The paperback version of the memo comes out September 15th with 2 new chapters, and I'm doing a special book tour, if you will, interactive experience next month. So you can get all that information at mindaharts.com. Sign up there. And I just want to thank you all. Sarah, your family always have a seat at my table. And for all those who are watching on LinkedIn and YouTube, make sure you share this information. And if you know someone who might want to attend the summit, share the information, because we don't hoard knowledge here. We share this. And so, Sarah, do you want to, any parting thoughts, any last that you'd like to share?
I just want to thank everybody for being active in the chat, for joining me and Minda for this conversation today. Anytime I get to spend time with her is a blessing, and anytime that we get to share the message with the people is great. So I just want to thank everybody in there. Please, go to my website, BuzzARooney LLC, connect with me here on LinkedIn, follow me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all those places, and get your tickets for HROI before it sells out. Thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you next Monday at noon. Have a great rest of your week. You get to define your narrative this week. Don't let anybody do that for you. We'll see you next Monday.